All right, welcome to IT Nation Wise Up, the podcast that skips the sales pitch and brings you real insights and strategies to help your business. We're your hosts, Matt Topper
and Vicki Bruns.
And we're thrilled to have you join us.
This is not your typical podcast. Our goal is to make IT community experts more accessible to you by highlighting their experience so we can learn and grow together. So if you're looking to stay ahead in the ever-evolving tech landscape, stick around as we dive into these topics and more that matter to you most.
So before we get started, just a quick reminder, don't forget to like and subscribe to IT Nation Wise Up. Make sure you never miss an episode. Now, let's dig into episode 1. Bill Stucklen. Bill, do you want to introduce yourself? Vicki and I know you, but I don't think the rest of the audience does.
There might be a few folks out there. So my name is Bill Stucklen. I am CTO of MSP+OS, which is a very exciting conglomeration of a number of us that have been in the space for a long time. I started as an MSP many years ago, came into the ConnectWise ecosystem, learned an awful lot about the tools, being an MSP to the point that we thought it would be fun to start a second company, and we started a company called Stack Advisors to really provide services around the ConnectWise suite of products. And from that, after about a decade, we said, hey, let's mash all these companies up together into MSP+OS to really cover the gamut, full suite of services around the ConnectWise suite of products. So I've been in the space for quite a long time under a few different names and monikers, but have always found this ecosystem to be amazing, and kind of stumbled into the MSP myself, but I'm really very fortunate to have been around from the very early days and watch it evolve into what it's become today.
That is really neat. I just wanted to say it's really interesting to see the journeys of people that were managed service providers that have evolved into a vendor of sorts for the MSP community based on what the needs are, the needs that they've identified that are required to grow the business. And so it's really an interesting story, because maybe we can tap into that here in a little bit. And Matt, I know that this is exciting for us too, because this is our first episode.
We made it.
We made
the origin
it.
Story.
So far, we're a few minutes in. So far, so good. Yeah.
Well, I'm very honored to be your first guest. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate it, Bill.
Yeah, we really do. And this is the whole essence of this podcast, Matt, is to give voices and to give our, I guess, platform of an audience, so that way we can bring in all of these amazing resources across the community, across the space.
Yeah, exactly, right? We want to share the knowledge that we've accumulated, right? We've had lots of conversations. We know people in the industry. We have all these stories, and we want to share them with our audience, with our partners at ConnectWise. One of the phrases that I used when we started talking about having a podcast was, I don't want this to be a vendor showcase, right? We've seen podcasts that are just sales pitches, and I want this to be about sharing real knowledge and getting those stories out there so that anyone watching really can improve their business and take something actionable away from every episode, right? Have some way to get to the end of the show and say, I learned something that I can go implement right now.
So you heard it here, folks. All right. This ain't no sales pitches. We are trying to make sure that we're bringing great education and knowledge to the forefront. So Bill, no pressure, but there is a reason why we invited you on to be our first guest for this podcast. Matt, what's the backstory? What's the backstory with Bill?
So the backstory is Bill's the only one who said yes.
Perfect. I should have checked my email.
Kidding. So when we started thinking about topics for this podcast, we looked at some of the previous submissions in prior years to IT Nation. And Bill, a couple years ago, had submitted a session about automation and maturity levels and the culture around automation. And this sounded like just the perfect thing to talk about as the landscape has changed in the past 2 years, with such even more focus on automation around things like AI and workflows and all that kind of thing. But I'm guessing, right? We haven't talked about this before, so I'm going to hear at the same time that everyone else does that the fundamentals of the culture and of the maturity haven't really changed, even though the technology has become forefront now, right? There's a non-technical aspect to this, almost a mindset aspect to it that I'd love to hear more about. So that is the topic. That's why we picked it. It seemed relevant, and it seemed like a way that the audience, everyone watching, you can really get something out of this.
Yeah, I'm really glad and honored to be invited. This is something that I have been not just passionate about when we had our MSP, but also passionate about bringing back to the community. And I've always enjoyed the opportunity to speak at the various IT Nation events and really share my knowledge, right? And it's, to me, I think, Matt, your point about it not being a sales pitch, to me is really important. Like, if you want to work with me, you'll reach out. I'd like to share and give back. I love giving back because the community supported me when I was starting out. And the community has continued to support me through all of the changes that the MSP space has been through. When we actually started our MSP, we were in New York City, very expensive market, and we were trying to figure out how we could basically save money, was really what kind of started us on this automation path. I always like to joke a little bit that, part of it was we were also lazy and we didn't want to have to do things over and over. The reality is that's the very base layer of what automation is. It is really about how you start to identify and create deeper and deeper layers of automation. So I've been talking about this in various ways, even as the ecosystem has matured, as MSPs have become, from a scrappy group of people that didn't want to do time and material but wanted to build businesses, to what we see today, which is massive PE-backed MSPs out there, providing services to hundreds of thousands of endpoints. Automation has been critical through that time to help these companies scale, to help them be efficient, to help them deal with the whole changes that we've seen as far as the threat landscape. And continuing to automate, I think, is almost as important as that first level of automation. And when you layer in where that automation comes from, that's where these session ideas have always been about, hey, how can I help people create a mindset, right? And we talk about the culture of automation, but it really is a mindset, and it shouldn't just be the technical minded people that have that mindset. It should be across the organization.
Can I ask a question, Bill? I'm curious to hear, since you've been in the industry for a while, and I've been talking about automation for so long. How have you seen, I guess, kind of the concept or definition of automation evolve through the years?
That's great. I think that early on, when we first started doing automation, a lot of it was, server based. It was about data move and very simple data move. And I think what has evolved, especially as MSP tools mature, because this was back before there was really any monitoring that wasn't an open source tool, right? And all the scripting was done in line and Linux bash scripting. What I think has evolved is that it went from really manipulating data or moving data or copying and doing cleanup. It started to move to the endpoint. And that first layer of automation became about the endpoint and about how to maintain it and about how to try to prevent, issues from happening and those daily tasks. Then it became about being proactive. And it was like, well, now let's start to do regular maintenance so that I don't have to have an engineer do it, but I also am not going to get the phone call from the angry client. Then it became about backup and disaster recovery. Then it became about security. And I think security is where it's really held on for quite a while, until a few years ago when the process automation, or robotic process automation from the enterprise space started to move down into the MSP space, whether that was them seeing an opportunity or really that, a mature industry that MSPs have become, have attracted talent from people that have been in the enterprise space. And so now it's about cross-product and cross-platform automation. And that's where I've really seen that maturity, come up from the very simple tasks of let's move files around on a Linux box to monitoring to, preventing or dealing with security to really now cross-product, cross-platform automation.
So usually when you think of maturity, right, as in usually when you think of automation as an MSP, you start going down that road of let me restart a service that failed, or let me automate the installation of this program. But you're talking about taking it to another level, to the business process layer, and thinking about how do I automate this outcome, even if it crosses the system boundary, correct?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's really important because I think things like restarting a service or doing, even reactive type of automation, like instant reaction based on what a machine is doing, those are simple, right? Everybody
Mhm.
has those, or everybody should have those. Doesn't mean they do, doesn't mean they're configured, but everybody should have those. Where it becomes powerful is the data that's captured on that event, how that moves through your system, right? Where does that go once something is found, whether it be a machine issue, a hardware issue, software issue, security issue? Once that alert is created, then what happens? That data moves through the system until the issue is closed, resolved, or escalated, right? And then resolved. So it's really important for me. Automation today has to move from product to product, has to enable the people that are interacting with it, or has to move product to product in a completely automated process.
So when
Go
you're, oh,
ahead, Vicky.
I was just going to say, I'm thinking of this in terms of a like an operational mindset, right? Of like, how are you setting the stage for all of the players within your business, right? And can you walk us through that a little bit? Is it kind of understanding like what the automation needs are and the data resource needs are of the business
Yeah,
first before the build out?
yeah, sure. So I think one of the key things around this is that automation automation can be very challenging, especially if you don't know exactly where to start. When you layer that into what is now, in my opinion, a very complex industry in MSP operations, there's multiple tools from multiple vendors, and a lot of times they have some type of automation in there. I think that a lot of times people will attack automation from the technical standpoint and not the process standpoint. And it's really important to look at the process. And this is when we now start to get into that layer of, hey, do you document your process? Do you have standard operating procedures, right?
Mhm.
Are you categorizing tickets so you can identify where things are at? And that is not just an engineer, right? That's why I say automation has to involve people from multiple job roles and functions. You need the techs, right, to create the scripts, which is a vital part of it. But you also need the managers or the service managers to understand the process around that. You need finance, because how is that going to affect billing? You need the owners, or the salespeople to participate, because all of that feeds this machine. And I think you're absolutely right. The operational standpoint is not just automating, even a auto remediation. It is about that whole process. And sometimes there are places in there where you will have that human interaction where you're going to have a human in the loop, but you can automate to that point, and then you can deviate across the appropriate path. I'm sure AI is on the mind of a lot of people. We've seen it. It can't make those decisions the way a human can, and it may never be able to. So layering this in has to be about the process, right? It has to be about where in the steps of that standard operating procedure or that best practice or something I picked up from IT conferences, like, oh man, this is a great idea, I have to go do this. You have to look at not just the steps that you're automating, but how does that affect the bigger operational picture?
So let me put my MSP hat on for a second. I think about automation and I think about, okay, man, this laptop took me forever to set up. Let me automate that, right? That's one side of automation. How do you start making that transition, right? If I run, say I'm the service manager at an MSP, how do I get my team to start thinking beyond, man, this laptop took forever to set up, let me automate it, and get into more of the types of holistic things that you're talking about?
Yeah, and that's a hard transition, and I think a lot of times it's hard for the engineer to do because they get in a routine and they're comfortable in that routine. The service manager, right? If you look at what is an RMM, for example, automates a lot of the work that a tech does, right? The service manager is the one that has to worry about onboarding a new client machine, right? How do we get that machine to the place we need to build it? How do we then assemble that? Can we automate that, right? Then how do we get that to the client? How do we onboard it for the client? How do we walk the client through that piece? So the engineer for them thinks, my task is to go set up this machine, make sure all the software is on there, and get my time in on the ticket and submit my timesheets at the end of the week. That's where their mind goes. So getting them to understand, hey, we need to track your time. We need to understand what you're doing, because that's what will help us identify things to automate, is a real shift, and a very difficult shift for them to do. That's why I always recommend get them involved in the planning, help them, give them the opportunity to have a voice to say, hey, what's the worst part of onboarding a client? How do we solve this? Either with existing tools that we have, maybe there's a new tool, maybe we need to document the process, and then how can we go and lay out an automation, and what pieces of this can we never automate? I think the other side of this is that we talk about, being more automated, being more efficient, being, operationally mature, so that there's not all these manual processes, is about giving engineers time to spend with clients, giving them that space time.
I was just about to tie into that, Bill. I'm so glad that you took us
It
there.
is. I'm going to put out there, though, not every engineer wants to spend time with clients. So you have to be careful about where you utilize the free time that automation is supposed to create, right? But it really should allow your team, the MSPs, the engineers, the tax, even the managers, to spend more time with the clients, which to me creates a stickier service than just something that is automated and efficient and prevents problems.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you could even use it as almost like a career pathing conversation of, you've done this, but if we're able to automate some of those menial tasks, then this helps you to grow your skill set by focusing on those more like those projects or partner collaborations, that can help you to grow in your career and stay at this organization, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Vicky. That is a really, really good point, and something that we've done as well. So, we came from the world of automate, and that was really where, when we started Stack Advisors 12 years ago, that was our thing, was automate. We were the experts. Well, that shifted. We know that shifted. We know that ConnectWise RMM is now sort of the preferred choice for a lot of MSPs to use a cloud-based. There's advantages to it, and there's stuff that you can't do in Automate, in RMM, and vice versa. And of course, there's a lot of other tools out there that have their benefits. But you have to look at, well, what happens now? If you're so focused and your skills are so centered around one specific product, what happens when the industry shifts? You need to start to look at that progression and that step. And so we created a role called an automation engineer. And we've been advocating for years to have somebody in-house that centers on this skill, that focuses on not just creating scripts, but creating automation across products. And their whole focus is about automation. That's a great step up. And listen, those folks, they then become system designers, architects. They start to figure out how to integrate and put these pieces together. And then they have the path they can go, and they can continue to be very technical around that, or they can go more into that management role, that concept role, and ultimately take my job, right? Lead the technology, have the vision. I mean, this is where these people, I didn't even have a tech background, but that's how I got started, was fixing computers, doing help desk. And that's what got me into this and into this mindset and got me moving down that path. So there's a huge career progression that people, they shouldn't feel that like, oh, well, if I continue to get better at Microsoft, that's kind of my thing. And then I don't know, I hope everything works out. There's much more to this. Automation's not going anywhere. AI is all part of automation. It's all about automating things as well. There is a huge career path, and I think it's a really, really positive selling point for service managers and execs, leadership team to promote that mindset. Is you're not just going to be an engineer creating automation. You're going to vision it. You're going to create it. You're going to drive it. You're going to manage it. You're going to discover it. You're going to innovate. And that's really, really rewarding for a lot of people.
I've heard this position be referred to as something like a DevOps engineer inside of the MSP, but it almost sounds like you're referring to a hybrid between a DevOps SRE type person and really someone who can do more business type consulting and go into your clients and help find the automations in the first place. Do you see it more of a hybrid role, or do you see this more of a deep, like, let me get good at DevOps and that kind of role?
Yeah, I think they're both. I think both are paths that people can take. Not, like I said, not everybody wants to go interact with the client. Not everybody wants to understand the operational side, the process side of it. What I do see though is for a lot of these skills to remain, critical to MSP operations, to be deeply involved in MSP operations, is you have to look beyond a single product focus, right? You have to look and, I always think of DevOps more about supporting a development infrastructure, but the skill sets, I think, Matt, it's a good point. The skill sets are very similar to running an MSP. And you have to have somebody internal that runs all the MSP systems in that automation. And then I think the other side of that is somebody external that can be external facing, not external to the company, but somebody that can be external facing and that can have a discussion with a non-technical individual and be able to interpret that into what that means from a technical standpoint. And that's a unique skill, and not everybody's going to have it. But I think more and more we see the conversations are around, does this product integrate? How does it integrate? And what can I do with that? Versus go create something in just this product and then, have it create an issue in our PSA if there's a problem, right? You have to think of things beyond that singular product.
Right. I would think that's where some of the big wins can start coming from, right? Initially, you're solving your internal efficiency problems, but if you can have those conversations, you can start getting into your clients' efficiency problems and help you solve them with technology.
Absolutely. I think it's important too to point out that, collaboration amongst internal, like when you start to look at automation, collaboration is really important. I mentioned all the sort of different stakeholders around an automation. Well, the other side of this is that collaboration and allowing people from different roles to go through the critical thinking, just maybe even just the logistics of creating an automation together, you start to see people blossom. And I've seen it in my career, giving people an opportunity that has low risk to them, right? They're not all right, Bryce, go create an automation to do this thing. No, we're helping do it together, and it builds the confidence. It builds that voice, and it allows them to start to discover themselves. So there's growth through that. And they start to be able to have those conversations outside of just, how do I create a script that goes through and does some loops and does some if-ends and does its thing? They can step back and think about things, not just about the lines of code or script that they need to create.
I think you're making a really good point here, because probably being the least technical out of this group here, I can tell you that I have a strong business background, but when I started working with technical teams and asking questions, when I was seeking clarity and not really knowing how everything connects and how it gets to this end state, then it really helped to open my eyes on how to really communicate more effectively with those technical teams to really get the best outcome possible for what we were looking for from a business output standpoint. And so you're making a great point of really focusing on how to bring everybody to the table, no matter what your role is, technical or non-technical, because either way, if you can learn how to communicate better together, then you're gonna do a better job servicing your clients and keeping your business running and growing. Those are really great points.
Yeah, and I think you've summed it up really well. It is, we don't see it. We don't see it in our own clients, right? As an MSP, we would always kind of recognize dysfunction, but our job there was to really fix technology, make sure it worked, make sure people, could get there. I mean, in the early days, right? What was it about? It was about email and internet, and that's it. That's all people cared about. there was a big movement a number of years ago about providing like VCIO services, right? It kind of came out and everybody's like, oh, be the term trusted advisor, get in, be the, if you get sticky with their data, then you're sticky with them forever. And I think there's value to that, but I think it's more than just a VCIO or a VCTO role. It is about understanding, hey, are you as a client mature enough in your process that we can automate it? Because then, then you're able to help say, okay, here's what you need for us to start to look at automation. Now, how do you get there? You mature on your own side, right? As an MSP, you need to have those steps around maturity. As far as operationally, you don't have to be, sitting up there in the floors, right, on the OML. You can start simple, but as you mature operationally, your automation matures, which then allows you to then help your clients' automation mature.
Right. And have more mature conversations with your clients, it sounds like.
And that's the key. Absolutely. Yeah. You can't go in and go, hey, we need to put security software on stuff when they're having conversations about how, their invoicing is a train wreck because one of their billing systems doesn't connect to the other billing system and they're cutting and pasting. Like, those kind of horror stories that tech people are like, oh, well, let's just make sure that these things integrate, or let's, call up ConnectWise and say, hey, can you guys, do this, or call us to create all that stuff. You should be able to at least have that conversation and understand how you can go create a process around that to then automate.
So let's talk about something tangible or actionable. If I'm an MSP and I have my guys making scripts, and maybe they're making automate scripts or RMM scripts, and that's their idea of automation now, saving time. And I go back to my office after watching this. What do I tell them to start this process going, to get them to start thinking about taking their mindset beyond just let me automate this technical task? Like, how can I train them to start doing that? Or is it I need to start doing it and they watch me?
So I think depending on the audience member from here, if you're an engineer, go back and look at what you did this week, right? Or the last month. Just take a look at your time entries, look at what you've done. If you're a service manager or some type of, team lead management piece, the first thing I'd say is make sure that you're capturing your ticket categories, not the time. Everybody beats, you got to get the time in, but look at where you're spending your time. And then you just a simple report, whether it's through Brightgauge or Report Writer or something, a simple report to show where time is being spent. Now, if everything's dumped into Mist, then I think the first step is to go back and put some basic categorization in there, because that's the only way you know where your time is being spent. Once you have that time spent, then the conversation becomes a lot easier, because you can say, hey guys, here's what we did the last couple of weeks. It's really important for us to make sure that we're tracking the right things so we can automate the right things. That starts that conversation of them going, oh, I know what I did all week. I did the same thing over and over again. At least gets them thinking that somebody's paying attention to it. The practical step outside of tickets, obviously, is a great way to grab that kind of information, is to look at, we brought it up earlier, just look at what you go through from a client onboarding standpoint. And, even if you're using a tool to do a lot of this, there's always stuff missing. And it's the engineers that have to do it. They're the ones that, always go, oh, great, new client machine, wonderful, great, I got to go finish the setup. And you have them start to capture it. I think getting the ideas first is better than going and writing scripts. I think the other thing that is important is to try to identify a point person. They don't have to lead it. They don't have to project management. They don't have to be in charge, but find a point person. Find somebody that's interesting or likes to go tinker with, tech or, automation stuff on their weekends, on their time off. Find somebody with that mindset, because they'll embrace this. They'll embrace the fact that somebody is paying attention to automating pieces of it. Start those conversations. Say you want to automate more. You want to be more efficient. You want to be able to grow without overworking people, right? Think of ways to express this to the team that doesn't make them think, oh, great, Bill went and, he must have listened to that podcast again, and now he's telling us to go do all this stuff, right? You get them involved, and I think that's maybe the most important piece. Get them involved in the conversation. You can build the why as to why you want to go automate. there's a lot of layers to that. There's a lot of things, you can save costs, reduce labor, reduce errors. Express to them, hey, automation is going to allow us to deliver a consistent and accurate service. Even things like onboarding, right? Even client onboarding or moving or rolling out, a new employee comes in and we just need to reconfigure the machine. Automation allows that consistency. Consistency prevents complaints.
Yeah,
It's
that's a good
happy
point.
clients, right? It's
Yeah.
client facing. Techs never get thanked. Rarely. Maybe never is a little harsh, but
It's rare.
it's so rare that they get, oh, it's working, boom, off the phone. It's rare that you get a thank you. Some of the CSAT tools certainly help, like, oh, they were great, but really you don't get thanked very much. Okay, that's part of the job. Like, you have to accept that, but make your job better. And you can make your job better by maybe not getting that thank you, but not getting a complaint or not getting a ticket reopened on, hey, I forgot this, I forgot this, I forgot this.
So the big thing I'm hearing is to get them involved, right? It can't be this management edict that comes down, go automate this.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Be developing a culture that says, I want to automate this. Can you help me do it?
Yeah. It's, look, it's also really important to make sure that you give them the time to automate, right? Make sure that you're allocating part of their utilization into creating automation. Don't say, hey, you guys need to
On
put
top of
in,
your job, can you
yeah,
also do this other project?
allocate time for it. It's an investment. That's a low investment, right? You're paying them to be there. What they will do, if they automate something that takes 30 minutes, maybe, there's some formulas out there you can find on the, how do you calculate the ROI on an automation? It's pretty simple. If you do something, multiple times in a week, let's say it takes you, and it's a 30-minute task. If it takes you 20 hours or to automate it, is that going to turn into 20 hours saved? Probably much more than that. But what you've done is built that experience. So I always caution, especially in the beginning, don't immediately go, well, what's the thing that's going to cost us the most to automate? You got to be careful. Don't just pick something to automate. You got to pick the right thing to automate, especially when you start to build that mindset, when you start to create, again, not just the engineers thinking about it, but, the service managers, the finance team, the sales team. They all have to start to think about, oh, I've done this over and over again. We should look at how can we automate this, or how can we streamline this and use what we have in place to make this more efficient.
So it sounds like, and again, I'm putting my my business hat on, right? Where if you have success stories that are starting to develop, then that's what you're taking back to your business. Because if you're a technician, maybe you're not getting thanked when you're helping to troubleshoot and resolve an issue from the client. But if you're getting a pat on the back from your employer because you helped to create efficiencies in the business by creating this new automation, then that also is a great way to show recognition and support and growth for your team. I'm loving what you're telling us, Bill.
Well,
this is great.
That is a great way to get people motivated about it. Is, a couple things you could create. A lot of people have dashboards in their office. Create an automation dashboard. Create something that is tracking and showing how much time is being saved. Start simple. Every time a script runs in the RMM tool, you should be putting time against it because it's saving you time. Put that up on the board. Show how much time automation is saving. Show how many tickets are automatically closed by this automation. There's a lot of ways to visually make it present. The other piece is to publicly reward the people. Verbally call them out in a team meeting. Give them an award, a gift card, right? Take them out to dinner. I don't, something. Give them something publicly where people go, oh, the company is interested in automation, and that fosters the mindset. People love that kind of stuff. It fosters the mindset. You don't even have to go so far as trying to do some big gamification around it.
Right.
It's just recognizing this stuff is running. I mean, listen, I think a lot of MSPs have automated stuff happening anyway. They may not even be creating tickets around it. I always say create a ticket. A closed ticket doesn't bother you at all, but you have a record of something that happened and something that would have even years ago, taken an engineer time to do. And it takes no time. It's all automatic. Track that. You can display that. Some people say, oh, well, that's just ways to pad your reports, ways to pad those, quarterly meetings that you have with clients. It doesn't have to be about that. It can be, again, about showing how automation is making a difference every day.
So let me ask you a hard question. I had a tech at one point say, I don't remember the exact words he used, but he was a support desk person just going through the phones in the queue. And he said something to me that was similar to, Matt, why should I automate anything? It just means I end up having more and more work to do. How do you answer that? Or how do you address that mindset?
I sit down and I go, listen, young Bill, I understand where you're coming from. I get it, right? Oh, if I automate this stuff, I have more work to do. It's a good question. And I think that what I always like to explain is automation should be about the mundane, not the exciting, right? Or the complex. Like, there are things that will be impossible to automate because you don't know what to automate because you have to do the discovery. And not every help desk engineer wants to ever get off the help desk. And you have to recognize that too, is that everybody wants to be motivated to go and do more. Some people are very comfortable in that role. Most are not. And most people that get into that space, they're interested and they want to learn. They want to do fun stuff. They want to go solve technical problems. I always explain this is not about your job. This is not about giving you more work. This is about making what you're working on more interesting. Let's get rid of the stuff that annoys you, that makes you go home and be like, wow, that was a crappy day. Like, find the things that are interesting and exciting. If we can automate that mundane, that gives you time to work on more complex problems.
It's like the conversations with AI. I freaking love having Microsoft 365 Copilot, because I don't know about you guys, but at the end of the day, when I'm writing an email and all my brain cells are depleted, I'm looking at it and I'm like, does this make sense? Should I send this? And then I check it in Copilot and I'm like, okay, actually, I like this wording a little bit better at this point. So I'm going to send that out. So instead of second guessing myself and, looking at an email for a lot longer than I need to, you get a double check and then you send it out. So I totally agree with you. It's like the conversations with AI and taking those menial tasks and saying, don't you want to do more fun things? Don't you want to progress your career and do things that you really care about instead of rereading an email 50 times?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's, that's where Matt, if they want to do more, you give them an opportunity, right? If they don't, they may be great. We had at our MSP multiple guys that they were the best help desk people. Clients love them. They love the fact that they were the ones that answered the phone. They'd have conversations with them, and then they'd work on the problem. And we said, okay, you guys are great. We want to start to put you into more and more of a client-facing role. Ooh, nope, don't want that. I really like what I'm doing here, and I want to stay here. Okay, well, let's try to build your skills and make it so you can do more stuff, but I'm not going to try to push you into anything. There were plenty of other people that were really interested about that. But that engagement of, again, support them, make sure they have time to do it. Don't go in with the expectation that they have to do it on their own. Support them in that, give them that opportunity. It's not about taking jobs at all. AI is not about taking jobs. Automation is not about taking jobs. It's about enabling people to talk with people, to solve problems.
What a concept.
I can't say though, however, sometimes I wish I had Copilot.
Well, Bill, Matt, I don't know if you have any other questions we want to ask. I feel like this is such a great topic. We could go on and on for hours about automation.
We could go on for hours.
I certainly could go on for hours and hours.
Well, I'll be honest with you both. When we came into this call and in this podcast recording, I wasn't really sure if I would be able to really keep up with Bill, but I feel like this has been really beneficial, again, for somebody from a non-technical mindset, to really help to make those connections too. So thanks for your input. Super helpful.
Yeah, I think that, automation it's not a tech thing. It's, yes, ultimately at the end of the day, you got to understand how to create the automation, the actual technical side of it. But automation is not just about that, right? It's about a lot more. And I always like to share a few tips with people about sort of what how do you automate, right? Start small, focus on the value. Pick something small, pick something easy, get the win, because the harder wins come down the road. Look at the tools you're already using, especially ones that have workflows, right? Or some type of bots or some type of automation. And it's not just RMM anymore. RMM's great for that endpoint interaction, but beyond that, the tools these days have a lot more that you can leverage to do simple pieces of automation. And you can worry about integrating those and making that data flow across together. You got to make sure that you're collaborating with your colleagues. Don't work in a silo. Don't go off into the dark cave of server room and do your automation. Work with people, have the conversation, because it affects people across the board. Testing is pretty obvious. Make sure you test things before you deploy. Make sure you document what the new process is or how it modifies. And then, to get back to what we were talking about a little earlier, is measuring and sharing those results. And sometimes that even means sharing it with clients, especially, I think there's two things. There's an MSP needs to automate, and then an MSP can start to automate for their clients. You need to understand what it takes to actually do a cross-product, cross-platform automation, which isn't all tech, again, but you need to understand that before you then go and start to try to help your clients automate.
Ooh. Matt, I feel like we're tapping into something else. We probably need to bring Bill back to have a second episode about automation to your clients, right? When you're having those client level conversations. So hopefully you'll accept our open invite to come join us again, Bill.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to. Hopefully this gets great ratings, so you guys will actually invite me back, because I love talking about this stuff.
So we have to finish up with one more question, and that is, if you could tell anyone listening what's a habit that they should either develop that they're not doing now, or something that you think they might be doing that they should break as a habit, what would it be?
Oh man, the break. So a habit they should do or a habit they should break. Well, I would say the habit they should break is overthinking what they need to automate. Don't overthink it. Go simple. So that would be a habit to break. Don't get hung up on the technical sides of what it takes, to automate. Talk with Vicky about what is it from an operational standpoint that, where do we run into problems, or where do we always have a hiccup? I think as far as a habit that they should create, that they should take, a habit to pick up when it comes to, I'm going to make it specific to automation, is remember and enjoy automating. Automation is so much fun. And once you start to find that groove, even if you're not the one writing the scripts or creating the workflows, a good habit is to remember how much fun automating is.
Oh, I love those. Those were good habits.
Those were good.
Matt, what about you? What is a habit that you would take or break that you recommend to our viewers, or listeners and viewers?
Listeners and viewers. So we talked about this being a cyber tip, but I'm going to do a cyber and an automation tip, because I've seen so many people get burned by this, and it's really specific. When you're checking things like backups in your automation system, this one drives me totally insane. Check for success, not lack of failure. Like, how many times have you seen some API stop working and you don't get any error message, and you deem that, hey, everything's great, there was no error message? Be looking for evidence that things went right, not lack of evidence that something went wrong.
Ooh, I like that too.
I do too. That's a good one. I am going to take that away. Thank you, Matt.
Well, I'll tell you guys my habit that I'm gonna follow Bill's lead here and say that when it comes to starting an automation project, let's say, or really any project for your business, don't overthink it. Like you said, start small. And I think that sometimes we can all kind of get into this analysis paralysis type of mentality. But once you start putting pen to paper, it feels like you are starting to make progress, because you are. So keep the positive momentum and just block time out. Make sure that you're allocating time and a little talent and treasure to bringing that idea to fruition.
Love it.
Like this podcast. Yeah. Well, Bill, we look forward to seeing you again for another episode of IT Nation Wise Up.
My pleasure. Anytime. I'd love to come back.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of IT Nation Wise Up, podcast that's all about driving your business forward. Be sure to subscribe today so you'll never miss an episode.
Yeah. And if you have topics that you want to hear about, please make sure to reach out to us at itnationpodcast@connectwise.com. And until then, remember that every day is a chance to learn something new. Thanks, everyone. And thanks, Bill.